little while ago, Blizzard cracked open the gates to the realm of Overwatch and allowed a bunch of people not yet in the beta to play it for a weekend from Friday to Monday morning. I was lucky enough to get to dig my grubby little mitts into it, and during the time that I had, I managed to squeeze in a little over 20 hours, and while Overwatch is hands down one of the best times I've had with the game this year, it could definitely be improved. For those who are unfamiliar, Overwatch is a class-based first-person shooter by way of MOBA from Blizzard that's due out in the spring of 2016. There are 21 characters available to choose from, and each has their own abilities, playstyle, strengths, and weaknesses. The goal of the game varies depending on the map that you're playing on, but the modes that I played were Capture Point, Payload, and a map where you capture point and then escort a payload. As a whole, Overwatch is just stupid amounts of fun to sit down and play. It's vibrant, the basics are easy enough to learn, I had a great time with each of the characters, even the ones that I'm rubbish at, and the matches are, on average, a great length of about 10 minutes. The heroes are sorted into 4 different roles, and the role assigned to a hero depends on that hero's abilities and playstyle. Each one is completely different than the last, and each one takes time to learn, especially if you want to learn some of the more difficult tricks and tech that some of them have. Some heroes are obviously easier to pick up than others, and I feel that every player is going to find at least a few characters that they just really gel with. Learning the characters of Overwatch is a lot like learning characters in Smash Bros. Now, I'm not saying that it's anywhere near as complex as Smash Bros, because it definitely isn't. I mean, Melee's been out for about 14 years and people are still discovering new things that you can do in that game. What I mean is that the process for learning a character and the way that it feels is very similar. You'll start off and you'll learn the basics of the characters that you know you're interested in, and before you know it, you'll know most of them like the back of your own hand. A final note on the heroes is that they're really well balanced. Despite what some will say, I feel that no character was truly overpowered, especially after spending enough time and learning what they can do and how they can be countered. I didn't have enough time to learn all of them 100%, but I can say without a doubt that each character has at least one weakness that can be used to your benefit by having at least one of a handful of characters on your own team. As an example, Bastion's turret mode is heavily countered by Junkrat and Tracer simply because they're Junkrat and Tracer. Like I said at the start, however, even though the heroes are well done and the game is incredibly fun, there are absolutely some improvements or changes that could be made. The rest of this video is general feedback, ranging from quality of life improvements to a probably minor technical issue or two. First off, there's no kill feed or way to tell which players on either team are dead, at least not without opening what Blizzard calls a scoreboard. All MOBAs have at least one of these, complete with respawn timers, and it makes no sense that a company that's already released a pretty solid MOBA is making what's been marketed as a competitive team-based shooter without either of these two things. While respawn timers are low, knowing who's dead and how much longer they're dead for can greatly improve team play. I feel as if a lot of the players I was with during the weekend didn't gather that each player respawns on their own as opposed to all at once like in other competitive shooters on the market. Second up to the plate, we need a proper scoreboard. This is something that I've seen mentioned all over the subreddit and on various forums, and I very much agree. The current board is so simple that I hardly ever used it except to see who was dead or to check team compositions periodically. Before the beta, some footage was released of matches for various characters, and the scoreboard back then was much better than it is now. It gave you a score for each player, and at the bottom it provided you with in-depth info on yourself for that match. Mr. G Almighty on the subreddit made a pretty solid mock-up of a potential scoreboard as well, and I find it far and away better than what exists right now. It seems that while Overwatch is being targeted out as a competitive game, Blizzard is still having trouble with how they simplify things. It's true that the more casual players could look at a board with massive amounts of info and be confused, but I highly doubt they'd be scared away by a bunch of numbers. Worst case, I imagine the board would be ignored. With a board more like the one originally in-game, players would be able to see their own stats on the fly and learn areas that they need to focus on, and seeing an actual score for players allows for prioritization of targets based on how good an enemy is. The current way to tell how good an enemy player is doing is by how much fire is around the player character's portrait, but it's a bit arbitrary and it doesn't really work for supports, and again, Blizzard's other team-based game has a full scoreboard with loads of info. As I mentioned, I played for a little over 20 hours. During that time, I played 3 maps in basically 2 game modes. There was a third that was a hybrid, but does that really count? I know that there's at least one other map in game that I didn't get to play during the stress test, and while I'm sure they plan on adding more than just that, I just wanted to be sure to express that 4 maps in 2.5 game modes is just not enough if Overwatch is to last. fast. Blizzard could make a few versions of each map with reused assets for each game mode. For a capture point map, you could just make the path a little different and turn it into a payload map. And you could have varying degrees of hybrid maps as well. It's also known that they're trying to figure out other game modes, but it's proving difficult since they don't want to have to rebalance any of the heroes around a specific mode. As an example, it's been said that they don't want to do capture the flag as they need to nerf Tracer and possibly Genji because of their high mobility. Another thing that I'm sure won't be an issue by release is lag, leading into rubber banding. During the peak hours of the stress test, I was bouncing around a lot, and at one point the game actually jumped me off of a ledge. What the fuck? What the fuck happened there? You guys saw that, right? Like, what the fuck was that? I want to reiterate that I had an absolute friggin' blast during the stress test. Despite the features and improvements that could be added or made, Overwatch is a hell of a time, and I can't wait to get to play it again and really start learning everything I can about it. If the developers make the right decisions, I can definitely see it becoming something that grows a strong competitive scene and lasts for a long time. Just a few wrong moves though, and all of that is right down the toilet with Roadhog's lunch. That's all for this time. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please feel free to leave a like, subscribe for more content like this, or to take a gander at my Overwatch gameplay footage linked down in the description. If you've gotten a chance to play, then what do you think of Overwatch and the points that I've made? What are some features or improvements that you'd like to see? If you haven't gotten to play, then please just hang in there. It may be a difficult wait, but I assure you that it'll be worth it. Feel free to let me know what you think with a comment down below or shoot me a message on Twitter. My handle's @ForkH. I'll see you next time. Bye!